What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Crew 2, and in this video I will be going over my top 8 touring cars on the game here. So it's kind of insane how many vehicle classes are on the Crew 2, and I really cannot wait to see what Motorfest has in store for us. But with that being said, guys, the touring car category did get a pretty insane update recently. Every single car is going to have the handling update added to them, which is going to make them a lot better. I really do feel like this is going to be long overdue for most of these cars, but not only that, I feel like a lot of these cars are also going to get a lot better and actually be usable in many summits and or events compared to before. But besides all that, guys, jumping right into this here, starting off with number 8 is probably going to be a bit of a shocking one. The Mini Cooper S Checkered Edition is going to be part of this recent Motor Pass. I actually feel like this car is going to be slightly underrated in some ways because I kind of feel like it's the mini meta. I really do feel like that was honestly a pretty terrible joke, but nonetheless, guys, this is definitely going to be a pretty interesting vehicle, and the main reason for that is, for one, it's going to have a crazy body kit on the car that surprisingly looks really good, and it's also going to be on the faster side as well, doing around 278 miles per hour, which is actually going to make the Mini Cooper S one of the fastest touring cars in the Crew 2, which I really was not expecting this with just a small car. I was kind of expecting this car to be kind of bad, but after messing around with the Mini Cooper, guys, I would highly recommend getting this thing from the Motor Pass. I actually feel like it's going to be one of the better touring cars in the game, mainly because of its size, and the main reason why I say that is going to come down to agility, which another car in this list also is really good for agility. But my goodness, I would say the Mini Cooper is going to be number 2 in the touring car class, especially when it comes to the overall agility the car is going to have going around corners. And luckily this car is also going to be on the faster side as well, so using a nitrochem as set, guys, you can easily do around 260 plus miles an hour with this vehicle. Now, I did mention the car is sure going to do around 278 miles per hour, but do keep in mind, guys, in order to get the vehicle to that top speed in some areas, it's definitely going to take a lot of nitrous to do so, and I did see on some roads, I was actually struggling to get the Mini Cooper to actually do 275, so it's most likely going to come down that the road you guys are on and or like maybe a hill or something like that, but at least this car can easily compete with some of the other ones. And one thing you can probably do with this car is maybe lower the gearbox by 1 point. That might not actually hurt it too much in the long run if you guys aren't doing those bigger US Speed Tour events and you're mostly just sticking to the tracks with the Mini Cooper. I would say this car is going to be pretty dang good, and I'm really surprised with how good this car is going to handle as well, which, if I had to guess, I would say a lot of people are most likely not expecting a Mini Cooper to have a crazy body kit with some big slicks on this thing, plus some nice golden rims, and a huge wing sticking off the back of it as well, and actually expect the car to do insanely good. But then again, guys, this is going to be the Crew 2, and there's also going to be some crazy builds out there, which I really do have to give a lot of people credit for the cars that they do build. I think it's awesome, and it's definitely going to be pretty insane to see what cars are going to be in the future of racing games, and or just racing in general. And then moving over to number 7 on the list, guys, is probably going to be a bit of a shocking one as well. The Chevrolet Corvette C6R. Now, what's kind of interesting about this vehicle is at first I never really thought this car was actually any good, but one thing I have been noticing even before the handling update is this car did show up in summits and or leaderboards pretty often, and I was actually finding this Corvette to be pretty dang good. Now, the top speed on the C6R is going to be around 252 miles per hour, so it's not going to be like the fastest touring car in the game or anything, but it can definitely get up to speed pretty easily. And one of the biggest things I noticed about the C6R right off the bat, guys, is going to be the way this car handles. Now, of course, all the touring vehicles are going to be a lot better now because of that handling update, but my goodness, some of the cars that were already pretty good are going to be that much better. What's kind of interesting is I really did not see a ton of the C6Rs around like being used in leaderboards, but I have been noticing more and more of these cars actually popping up, which is awesome. I feel like this might be one of the underrated touring cars in the Crew 2, mainly because of how good it actually is. I feel like the handling and or stability is going to be pretty insane, and the overall speed on this car is also going to be really good as well when it comes to acceleration. Sure, the top speed's going to be slightly lower on this car, but I really don't think that's going to matter on tracks though. I would say 250 miles per hour is going to be more than enough speed on most of the tracks. If you guys were to do like one of the US Speed Tour events, then yeah, maybe like an extra 10 or so miles per hour compared to some of the other cars is probably going to be a big difference. But from a lot of the testing I have done on many of the tracks though, I would say the lower top speed's really not going to hurt this car all that much. And in some ways it's actually going to be pretty dang good because it's going to accelerate so quickly. And if you guys need to hit that top speed at a faster rate, I would say it's going to be a bit better. Of course, on the bigger events though, having a higher top speed is going to be pretty helpful. But one of the biggest things I noticed about the tracks though is you guys will want that overall speed when it comes to cornering, and top speed's really not going to be that big of a deal, and I would definitely say the Corvette C6R is going to be an insanely good option when it comes to handling. Which, let's be honest guys, a lot of the touring cars are going to be better, but even then, I still would say some cars are going to be a better option like the C6R. But from a lot of the testing I have done on many of the tracks though, I would say the lower top speed's really not going to hurt this car all that much. And in some ways it's actually going to be pretty dang good because it's going to accelerate so quickly. And if you guys need to hit that top speed at a faster rate, I would say it's going to be a bit better. Of course, on the bigger events though, having a higher top speed is going to be pretty helpful. But one of the biggest things I noticed about the tracks though is you guys will want that overall speed when it comes to cornering, and top speed's really not going to be that big of a deal, and I would definitely say the Corvette C6R is going to be an insanely good option when it comes to handling. Which, let's be honest guys, a lot of the touring cars are going to be better, but even then, I still would say some cars are going to be a better option like the C6R. I started to really dig this car a lot when I was testing it out back in the day on some of the Dominion Forsberg events, and or some of the Frozen races as well, which are probably going to be a big controversy in themselves, but overall guys, I really do think the C6R is going to be an awesome overall vehicle, and I would definitely recommend trying this car out, because I still think the C6R is going to be on the underrated side, even to this day. And then moving over to number 6 on the list is probably going to be considered one of the new meta cars. The Ferrari FXX K is probably going to be a lot of players' favorite. I have been noticing guys on many of the events recently that they are covered in the FXX K, which honestly I really cannot blame you because this car is incredible. I actually had a separate video on this vehicle before I actually did the top 8, and I really do think this car is still going to remain to be one of the best. And of course guys, lowering the gearbox on these vehicles is going to make them slightly slower. When I was actually testing this car out in that video, I actually had the gearbox down one piece, making it do 240 miles per hour. The actual top speed on the car is going to be around 250, which is still going to be a lot better than 240, but it's still not going to be the fastest thing out there. Luckily, even though the top speed is going to be slightly lower on the FXX K compared to some of the other cars, I really don't think that's going to hurt this vehicle at all, guys, because this Ferrari might have some of the best handling in this entire class, even though there's like 70 other cars, which, by the way, guys, I will be doing updated videos on every single car in this class most likely, and I'm also going to be doing an updated video for the fastest bikes as well. But overall, guys, I really do think the Ferrari here is going to be one heck of a vehicle. Not only is this thing going to have insanely nice acceleration doing up to 250, it's going to have some of the best handling and or stability around corners I have ever seen. Like, this car feels so dang good flying around a corner, guys, and luckily you can also get around corners easier. I was actually finding myself dropping like maybe one gear, and I would then fly around the corner going a bit faster in this car than some of the other touring vehicles. So this thing is definitely going to most likely take over most of the leaderboards in the future, and I have a feeling it might actually be considered one of the new metas, which is pretty insane considering I have never really seen this car anywhere in this game until after this update, because before, I really don't think the FXX K was honestly all that great, so being able to see this car actually make a return in the game I think is awesome. I really cannot wait to test out some of these other cars and see if they can compete with some of the better ones like this car here. The Ferrari is just going to be an absolute monster in every way, and At first, I did see a lot of people talking about the FXX K for a bit, so I was like, you know what, this thing actually must be insanely good after this update, so let's jump right into the FXX K and really see what it can do, and my goodness guys, this car is definitely going to be pretty dang incredible. I would say the biggest thing about it is most likely going to come down to how this car feels when it comes to handling and stability. I really do feel like it's actually going to be a lot better than most of the other touring vehicles, at least from the testing I have done with many of them so far, which I will definitely be jumping into more of those to really see how they can compare to something like this Ferrari, and to really see if they can be used in summits and or if they're actually good enough. But if you guys are looking for what I would say is probably going to be the new meta, it's most likely going to be this Ferrari, basically by a landslide. And then moving over to number 5 on the list is going to be the Corvette C8R. I actually would say this car is going to be a lot better than I think a lot of people think it is, including myself, because at first I really did not think this car was going to be all that great. Do keep in mind, by the way guys, if you do want to get this vehicle, you will have to get the motor pass and hit level 13 to unlock this thing, which I would definitely recommend going after. For one, it's not only going to look insanely awesome with this body kit, it also sounds insanely good, plus the top speed is going to be around 265 miles per hour, making it one of the faster touring cars in the game. So this thing is definitely going to be worth a look if you guys are looking for one. Maybe you're into like American Muscle and or like Corvettes in general, I would definitely recommend buying this thing. And with the C6 also being on the list, I could not find another reason not to put the C8 on here as well. For one, this car is actually going to be able to back up the performance of it insanely well. I do find the handling and stability to be on the better side with this vehicle compared to the others. It's kind of insane when you add like a handling update to how much better the cars actually are. And I have been noticing even with that update, some of the vehicles are still kind of like and I would probably not recommend actually using some of them and or using them for summits and or PvP. Like, sure, the cars are still going to be good overall, but I would not recommend doing like events like that with them. And I would say there is going to be better options like the C8R here. This car is honestly pretty incredible, guys, and I cannot wait to see how the leaderboards will fill up with it. Even though I really have not seen that many people running this car, is kind of interesting. I actually consider the C8 to be insanely good, and I know it's probably not going to be able to compete with like the FXX K in some areas, but even with the Ferrari being slightly better in some way, I would still say the C8R is going to be a really great overall option, especially if you guys might want to stay away from some of the quote-unquote meta vehicles on the game and or cars that might be overused. You might want to try something else out like the C8R, which can easily compete. And luckily the top speed on this car, guys, is going to be 265 miles an hour, giving it 15 miles per hour over the FXX K. So on those longer speed tour events, you will definitely have an advantage on the longer events because of that top speed with the C8R. I did notice, guys, on straightaways and all that, you can easily pull away from something like the FXX K. Of course, that car is probably going to catch you in some of the corners, but on some of the events with bigger straightaways, I would say the C8R might have the edge, even compared to the FXX K. And now moving over to number 4 on the list is probably going to be considered the old meta. The Renault R.S.01, guys, is still going to remain one of my favorite cars in the touring car class. This car is not only going to look like an R8, which is funnily enough what I thought it was when it first came out. I really do see the resemblance of that with this vehicle, but the Renault is honestly going to be a pretty incredible vehicle, not only because it looks pretty awesome, but it's also going to have some insane acceleration and or handling to back it up. So the top speed of the Renault is actually one of the first things I noticed back in the day with this vehicle. This thing is going to do around 265 miles per hour, guys, and back then this was also considered one of the fastest touring cars in the game, which, if I had to guess, I would say it's most likely going to remain that way even to this day. And even though some of the other touring cars are probably going to take the place of the RS01, I would still say a lot of the summits and or events are still going to be covered in this vehicle, which is probably going to be for good reasoning because the Renault is that good. One of the first things I noticed about the Renault back in the day was probably going to be the acceleration. I feel like this car is still going to remain to be one of the fastest accelerating touring cars in the game, and like the overall speed when it comes to coming out of corners and or like flying into corners as well. Now sure guys, this thing is going to be a 7-speed, so if you are in manual, you are most likely going to find yourself shifting the car a tad too often and or not enough. Funnily enough guys, even to this day I still don't shift the car enough when I start out in races, mainly because I'm not expecting this thing to redline as fast as it does, which I would say after using the car for a little bit you'll probably get a lot more used to it, and it would most likely turn into like a second nature thing when driving the Renault around. But even with this thing being one of the faster accelerating vehicles guys, to this day it still has incredibly good handling, which I was honestly kind of surprised about with some of these cars, mainly because of how some of them are. I would say some of them probably did not need a handling update and or some of them probably would never need one, mainly because back in the day they were also considered to be the metas. But even to this day guys, I would still say the Renault is probably going to be considered a meta touring car for a long time. And now moving over to number 3 on the list is going to be the BMW Z4 GT3. Even to this day guys, after that one update a while back, I've been seeing myself running this car a lot more often. I would actually say it's probably going to have some of the best agility in the entire game. As I was mentioning guys with the Mini Cooper S, I feel like the Z4 is going to have so much agility on the track when it comes to like maneuvering back and forth and or getting around corners, and the top speed of this car is also going to be around 255 miles per hour, so it's still going to be up there when it comes to its overall top speed. It's not going to be the fastest touring car in the game, but to be honest with the Z4, I really don't think that's going to matter all that much because I have been noticing this car has definitely been in the top leaderboards for a while now, especially when it comes to summits as well. I've been noticing a lot more people actually racing around the Z4 than way before back in the day. I basically never saw anybody actually run this vehicle, so seeing something like the Z4 get some love now and or a car that you really would never see is always going to be a great sight with these vehicles on the Crew 2. But overall guys, I do think the biggest highlight of the Z4 from the testing I have done is easily going to be that lightweight and or nimble feeling that the Z4 does have when racing it. I was also noticing this with the Mini Cooper S Checkered edition as well. I find these smaller cars to be really good around these tracks guys because of the agility that they do have, and I feel like the Z4 is going to be no exception to that. And I also did notice guys after that one update that the Z4 actually turned into one of the meta cars in the touring car category, and even after the recent update with all the other cars getting updated, I do have a feeling the Z4 is still going to remain probably top 5 in all of the touring cars in the game. I still see this car pretty dang often in many of the summits, which I have a feeling is not going to change anytime soon. And then moving over to number 2 on the list is going to be a touring car I really have never used in the past, hence the reason why I only have 11 miles on the Saleen S7R. But overall guys, this car honestly came to a bit of a shock to me how good this thing actually is. Not only have I been seeing this car basically in a lot of leaderboards and or being used a lot in summits, it really dawned on me to try this car out and really see why it's going to be so dang good. So for one guys, the Saleen S7R is not only going to be an insanely nice handling touring car, it's also going to be one of the fastest touring cars in the game as well. This thing does around 270 miles per hour for a top speed, which is going to make it one of the faster touring cars in the game. One thing I have noticed guys about some of these touring cars is yes, they're going to have a higher top speed like that. I would say the biggest example of this is probably going to be the Mini Cooper. That thing does around 278, but it honestly struggles to get there. One thing I was noticing about the S7R here is the fact that it doesn't actually struggle that much, and it seems to get up to speed pretty dang fast as well. So the first thing I wanted to do with this vehicle was to actually jump into a race and really see how it does perform, and my goodness, I can really see why so many players have been choosing the S7. I've also been seeing many people actually talking about this car as well around, so I really did want to see why it's actually so dang good. And my goodness guys, I would actually say this might actually be one of the new metas, because my goodness, I feel like a lot of players are most likely going to pick the Saleen over like the Renault and or something like the CCGT, which I'm sure a lot of people noticed wasn't even on my list. I would actually say, guys, the CCGT did not make the list because of this reason. I found the S7R to be a lot better, and honestly, I found a lot of cars to be a lot better than the Koenigsegg, so after the handling update, definitely changed my mind on that car a lot, and I have a feeling that's probably going to happen in the future with some of these other touring cars as well, but overall, I feel like the S7 Saleen is not only going to be one of the best handling touring cars, it's also going to be one of the fastest. One thing I find so interesting about the S7 Saleen is also going to be the fact of the handling. Normally when you guys have a car that has a higher top speed, you tend to have a bad handling model, and or the car doesn't handle all that great, but my goodness though, the S7R is by far going to be like a jack of all trades. Not only can this car do 270, but my goodness, it can also handle insanely well. But I'm sure a lot of players might be wondering, how is something like the S7R going to compete against like the FXX K, which honestly guys, I would say both cars are probably going to have their own place. That Ferrari is by far going to be absolutely insane on a lot of the tracks, whereas I would say the S7R can probably do a lot of the track racing. This car is going to be an absolute monster on a lot of the US Speed Tour events. And now guys, moving over to number 1 on the list is going to be the Lamborghini Gallardo LP574 Super Trofeo. I would actually say this car is probably not going to come to a shock to a lot of players, mainly because this car has always been insanely good. I actually always considered the Gallardo here to be one of the like meta vehicles basically for a long time, and I have a feeling it's going to remain that because this car is still honestly incredible. I have such a great time using it, and not only is it going to handle insanely well, it's also going to be one of the fastest touring cars in the game, guys, going 272 miles per hour. I would say having insane handling plus a top speed like that's definitely going to be a pretty interesting sight to see, mainly because it's going to be hard to choose other vehicles in the class that are also going to be slightly slower, and or maybe they might not have the overall speed that the Lamborghini can achieve. But one thing for sure though is I would say the S7R is going to be a direct rival to this vehicle. I do think this is going to be great for competition in the future though, because I feel like a lot of players are most likely going to experiment with both cars and really see which one they actually like more. And by the way guys, let me know in the comments below if you guys would like to see some comparison videos in the future, like for example the Gallardo versus like the S7 Saleen. I feel like a lot of these cars are definitely going to be pretty insane now after this update. One thing I do have to admit though is I did not actually think the Gallardo was really going to lose its place, mainly because this car has been so good for so long, and what's kind of hilarious is I actually stopped using the Gallardo a long time ago because I really did love this car that much. I honestly did not feel right using this vehicle that much in summits. I kind of felt kind of slimy running it because I know the car is so dang good. I feel kind of bad if players don't actually have it. But I actually decided to run the Gallardo once again in one of the recent races in one of the summits. It's actually going to be one of the new US Speed Tour City races, and my goodness guys, this car never disappoints. It's always such a hoot to drive and or race around on the game. Plus one thing I have noticed though is the overall speed of the Lamborghini is going to be absolutely insane. Like the amount of time you guys can fly out of corners at crazy speeds with this car and or hit 270 miles per hour on a straightaway is just going to be insane. And I do have a feeling it's probably going to be hard to pick other vehicles with having something like this. I might actually try out this car more in the future and really put it against some of the other touring vehicles, but I do have a feeling the Lamborghini here is most likely not going to lose its place anywhere. I would still say to this day guys, this car is easily going to maintain that top spot, and I have a feeling it's going to stay up there for quite a while. But now we're going to have some cars that are almost like mosquitoes, basically hitting this vehicle here and there, showing that they're also going to be really good. Something like the BMW Z4 and or the Ferrari FXX K and the lovely Saleen S7R are all still going to be insanely good cars, and in some players' hands might actually be better than this Lamborghini. Now, I'm sure some people might be wondering why I didn't include some of the other vehicles in this list, and to be honest guys, I feel like a lot of the cars in the touring car class are going to be really good, which I did mention earlier. I will be doing videos on all of them after this handling update, so definitely stay tuned for that. But some cars like the KTM Expo are still going to be really great options overall for many of the events, but I do feel like some cars are going to have a bit of an advantage over some of those, whether it's going to be like handling instability and or like overall speed slash like top speed. I feel like a lot of the cars might be unique in their own ways and or some players might find some to be better than the others. I do want to know what you guys think in the comments below. Which is your favorite touring car in the entire game, is why, and or maybe like what's your top 3 or 4 or something like that, because I feel like there's so many good ones. And I feel like as time goes on, a lot of players are most likely going to discover more touring cars that are also going to be great competitors. And I feel like over time, a lot of players are most likely going to discover other touring vehicles that are also going to be great competitors. I really cannot wait to test out some of these cars, guys, and really see what they can do. Definitely stay tuned for those videos in the near future. And then here are my vehicle settings I'm currently running on my top 8 touring cars in the Crew 2.